commissioner of the Southeastern Conference, joining us right now. He will also have a busy weekend. And I think fans look at your job, Commissioner Sankey, and go, man, that's got to be the greatest job in the world. You're seeing 2 games on Saturday. A couple of different times this year you have caught 2 games in one day. I realize there's a lot of pressure, but it must be pretty cool to go to 2 games in one day, though.
Yeah, I appreciate it every time. There is a bit of pressure. People have opinions. They express them directly from time to time. But in the middle, particularly on a Saturday, that first game, I really, really enjoy standing in an end zone watching kickoff, because that's when all of the work for the week behind me kind of stops. You just get to enjoy the moment.
And this Saturday, it will be something unique. I know you have traveled the country, and we see you all the time, a lot of times this year, coming by our Saturday morning show and then going to the game. But you will be attending the game in Dallas between Oklahoma and Texas. We understand the Big 12 commissioner won't be there, but you will, and those are 2 schools that everybody is anticipatory of. Tell us about the reason why you're going there before you head to Aggie land.
Well, a couple of reasons. One, tomorrow I travel to Austin. We have some dear friends whose daughter is getting married on Saturday. And since I'm busy on Saturday, I can kind of pre-position to see the wedding of Alyssa Smith and Blair Williams, or at least the rehearsal dinner. Not important to the football world, but important to me. So you do try to combine a personal life with work, and then I'll be up early, fly to Dallas. I had wanted to attend the Oklahoma-Texas game actually for a while. I lived in Dallas for 11 years. I was the commissioner of the Southland Conference, so I was otherwise busy. And when we made the big news in 2021 that Oklahoma and Texas would be joining, at some point before they joined officially, I knew I wanted to just experience that game, wanted to be back in the Cotton Bowl Stadium. And the way the schedule lines up personally, and then with our football games, can start my morning in Dallas and then move quickly for the kickoff of Alabama at Texas A&M, which is an enormous game in its own right.
Yeah, no, I love going to campuses, but I'm sitting here listening, and I speak for the entire audience. We're all envious of that day, getting to participate in those 2 games. I say that jokingly and with a tinge of seriousness, because I've seen you at these games. It's not like you grab a hot dog, a beer, and sit back. I mean, you're dealing with presidents, you're dealing with dignitaries, and the media is also chasing you around.
That's true. So my schedule is built out. We literally, Paul, just finished a meeting of our athletics directors here in Birmingham. And I had an opportunity with Joe Castiglione and Chris Del Conte to say, okay, guys, here's my routine. At 10:30 Saturday, I have an opportunity to visit with the press in attendance somewhere in the stadium. I'm not exactly sure where. I said to Joe and Chris, I said, I want to make sure I touch base with whoever is representing your university. Obviously, Jay Hartzell and Joe Harris, the 2 presidents, Chris and Joe, and then any other folks who I can touch. I'd love to see them. I attend a lot of football games. I rarely watch football games. In fact, I was at Hawaii Vanderbilt, that week 0 game. You may recall I had a weather delay, and it was the first time I had actually watched the Peach Bowl between Ohio State and Georgia from last year in a suite. So I attend games. I rarely have the luxury of watching games.
I realize these athletic director meetings come periodically. They are important. I don't know how much you can share with us, but I think we would be interested at least getting the gist of some of the conversations and concerns.
Well, sure. We swore everyone to secrecy, and so I'll be coy, which will be interesting, right? We continue to talk through membership transition issues. You'll recall we made a decision in Destin to remain at 8 games for the 24 season. We did not make any decisions about the future today. We continue to talk about what the future may look like, 2025 and beyond. Interestingly enough, our Big Ten colleagues introduced their 18-team schedule in the midst of our athletics directors meeting. So I think I had 16 texts of that graphic sent to me. But we updated our athletics directors on some of their considerations, tried to clarify the information. Looking at our other schedules, our baseball tournament, we've been assigned some work on what formats might be developed. Obviously, have a location discussion taking place there. We've had a great experience in Hoover and have had great conversations about continuing in Hoover. We spent a lot of time talking about what's happening in the big picture. You and I have talked about my conversations in DC. The last 5, 6, 7 days in Washington, DC have been not exactly the smoothest sailing, if you will. That has impacts on the ability for us to have ongoing conversations about the need for congressional engagement and action to make sure we support college athletics in the most healthy way possible moving forward. The NCAA made a set of announcements over the last 48 hours, some about transparency and student athlete protections and name, image, and likeness, some about football recruiting. We finished talking about basketball, just understanding the landscape in men's and women's basketball, what's happening around us, kind of in a big picture, the number of conference games scheduled and the number of other places, how we continue to support both basketball and all of our other total of 21 championship sports in the most healthy way. And believe it or not, we ran out of time. So we went from 8:30 to 3:30. Our athletics directors have commitments this evening back on campus in many places. And that filled up our day.
When does that get addressed again in terms of a determination for the next year, beyond 24?
Yeah, that's the magic question. And I love being like Austin Powers, the international man of mystery on dates like that, right? So you go back to our conversations in COVID, and you and I have joked about this off to the side. I was continually pressed for dates. I set a date, and we actually went a week or two longer, and it ended up working really well. My position in Destin was I didn't see us going to Destin next year to make that decision. I still think that's relevant. So we meet every other week by video conference. We have a couple of meetings once the calendar flips in person. So I think we'd really be focused on outcomes in the first quarter or so next year. Could we play it out to Destin? We could. We did that this year. It would depend on the format. But I think we'll see, first 3 months of 2024, the effort to come to conclusion, certainly on the 2025 season. But, you never know. Sometimes you use a little bit of time and it ends up being a really wise decision.
Commissioner, it was the summer of change across the landscape, and we talked in Nashville about that. The SEC, is different than other leagues in terms of bringing in Oklahoma and Texas. In terms of what you had today, your membership ADs, can you address just those conversations in general, of course, about the landscape of expansion?
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to. So really, you go back to October of 2015. So this time, 8 years ago, we had a presidents and chancellors meeting. It was the first time that my training wheels were off. I was the new commissioner. It was the first time that I was in that role. I'd been in the president's room many, many times when Mike Slive led the SEC, but it was my first time to lead the meeting. And one of the things I identified was what we had seen in the preceding 10 years with conference movement. And if you go back really to 2003 or so, the 12-year since, there had been movement with ACC expansion, Big Ten expansion, the Pac-12 expansion, the effort to go to 16, our expansion, and there wasn't an indication that it would just stop at that point. And so what I wanted to do way back in 2015 is say, hey, here's the stage on which we operate. Here are dates out in the future that may impact our decision making. And so while it was a stressful time in the summer of 2021, it wasn't the first time we'd had conversation about movement. The reality is, I think our decision making in 2021 has proven to be really, really wise, really well informed, really forward looking for us to be a 16-team conference with by far the best geography among any of the bowl subdivision conferences. Certainly those that have been classified in Autonomy 5, the strength of adding the programs across the board in Oklahoma and Texas to 14 great athletics programs, 14 great universities, allowed us really to watch. And Paul, going back to last summer when the news broke about the Big Ten's expansion out west, we started engaging in what might the future look like for us. And time after time, the message was, we understand who we are as a league. We have this great footprint with passionate fans. Student athletes can come here and not spend time on planes. They can get to and from places pretty quickly. They can prepare themselves academically and athletically. That's who we are, in addition to being, I think, the highest level conference among our colleagues. And so that's a point of pride. We've watched, we're going to pay attention to what continues to happen around us. We'll be prepared. We're not recruiters, but we certainly are aware, and we want to be respectful. And as I said, I think to you back maybe in Nashville, and it may have been in Destin, I shared a memo with our presidents that at that time, I would have been pleased if everyone just stayed where they are. That's not reality, but it hasn't created this fervor, this panic, or just a reaction from us, because we're focused on being the best possible conference of 16 universities that we can be.
There's one conference out there that could have only two schools, I think, next year. And the reason I bring that up is that I know you recently were at the CFP meetings, and I didn't hear much definitive coming out of that. Can you address what the future of the CFP looks like as we make the turn this year?
Very much focused on the expansion to 12 teams, and that has to be priority number one for us. We also have an effort that was launched back in June that will move along quite rapidly to find the next executive director for the college football playoff. Those two elements of work are time consuming and take a lot of energy and focus. And so those priorities are real. And then what do we do? People have speculated about media. What do we do about our media agreements moving forward? We've had and still have a great relationship with ESPN, but as the playoff expands, that causes us to have to look in a different way as we come to the conclusion of a set of 12-year contracts, which happen after the 25 season. We have to prepare for what do our relationships with bowls look like, and what do we look like from a scheduling standpoint if we have a little bit more flexibility. Those are really the key decisions. We didn't spend a lot of time in our last couple of in-person meetings talking about the particular dynamic with the changes in the Pac-12. We know that's out there. Certainly, there are questions asked. I was at the NCAA Council meeting. There have been reports, and I was not in the room, when Pat Chun, the Washington State athletic director, kind of shared a perspective from, I think, Washington State and Oregon State, and I'm certainly respectful of the challenges they face. I think the time for more conversation about that will come, but it hasn't been something that has been central in our meetings of the College Football Playoff Management Committee in the last 60 to 90 days, because we have so many important kind of immediate decisions in front of us now.
And finally, Commissioner, I want to go back a couple of days to a conversation we had with Eli Capilouto, the president at the University of Kentucky, and he said a lot of really interesting and important things, but he was also very concerned about the future of intercollegiate athletics. You addressed the NIL card with Congress, but there are so many other issues, a lot of litigation, a lot of concern about where we go from here, and I think we'd all be curious to hear your view of where we are heading.
I thought, and I think this, so you're headed to Georgia tomorrow. I think, Paul, your time on campus in the fall on Fridays is incredibly meaningful. And that conversation with Dr. Capilouto is but one example. The opening conversation with Mitch Barnhart. In fact, I saw Kyra in the conversation about women's basketball and officials. I mean, that's gold right there, Jerry. That's gold, as the Seinfeld episode went. But I think Dr. Capilouto communicated really well that while we experience full stadiums, great TV ratings, there are external pressures around all of college sports, not just football, not just men's basketball, but all of college sports. A part of that is litigation that we're dealing with. And you've seen news in the last few weeks about a class certification hearing. That outcome is important for us. You've seen filings in different regions of the country around employment issues. Those decisions are incredibly important to us, and they have impact not simply on the Southeastern Conference, but on smaller Division I colleges and universities. We've seen letters from HBCU leaders about how they look at these important issues. Division II and Division III, we're all part of this college athletics ecosystem. And part of the communication that you heard from Dr. Capilouto, and part of what I've tried to communicate is in this ecosystem, we're challenged and we're going to be challenged. And we have to figure out both how to adapt, which we have, but how to make sure that for years and decades to come, young people have opportunities to compete in swimming and diving, to compete in track and field, to play softball, to play volleyball, to participate on baseball teams or golf teams in a healthy way. And we want to make sure that's a part of what college athletics is, broad-based programs. We need to make sure certain we're always focusing on academic outcomes, on moving young people from adolescence to adulthood, while this model continues to adapt and we deal with the pressures that were identified. So of anything that occupies my mind, and I think our collective mind, those issues are at the top of the list while we still engage in high-level competition and supporting young people in a way that makes this the best time to be a college athlete in the history of college sports. And that's why I look forward to those moments in an end zone when kickoff happens on the first game of the day, just to enjoy the game for a moment.
Commissioner, we certainly appreciate your time. And can't wait to hear more about this weekend in Texas. We are all very envious. Have a great time. Thank you for coming by.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for the conversation.
Give me something. Try to shake